Thank you. And do we need to put it on everyone on screen? I think we should do that just because that might work. I don't think I have to spotlight right now. Can everyone see everyone? I mean, I know you're not on camera, but that's okay. Just want to make sure we can see everybody on camera.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're going to jump in. We're going to get started. Jantina, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a room full of Black women and Latinx women, and that is exciting to me. I think I shared with you that our cohorts, we're on the third one now. We just announced the third one, but they have over-indexed as Black women. And that's been something that I think really stands out, especially in the tech space. Normally you see kind of the other side, it's mostly men, not as many women. And so the fact that they've been over indexing on women is super exciting to me. Obviously, also being a woman of color. So I'm excited that you actually are our first speaker of this series. So we initially launched our first cohort in July, at the end of July, actually. So our cohorts launch usually, I think, the fourth week in July or third week of each month. And so there's some people in here, and if it's okay for some folks, I would love for you to drop in the chat which cohort you're in and then what you're getting your certification in, just so we have it. But it felt like a good time to start kind of these talks. Like, people have gotten their hands in it, they know what they're doing, they're getting used to it, and then we have enough people that will actually show up to a lot of these things. So right now we are teaching project management, product management, sales, IT support, digital marketing, data analytics, Python, and I know I'm forgetting one. I always forget one. UI UX design.
Okay.
And so I think everyone in here is probably a representative of one of those many. And so for me, the goal here is a fewfold. One, for them to get to know you. We've gotten to know each other, via some calls, through text, just kind of sharing. And I've just been really excited about you and the work that you've been doing, and also the passion you have about this particular subject, seeing more people that look like us in these spaces, but also creating spaces where we actually are welcome, and that we're actually able to be a part of and can be our whole selves. And so I thought you would be a great kind of kickoff point for this group. To kind of share about you. So I'll do a short kind of like intro bio on you. And then I have some initial questions to kind of get things started. And then I want to really lean on the group to either throw questions in the chat, or if you want to come on camera or come on voice and just ask any questions that you have, I would like to do that. I want this to be really free flowing. I want people to feel like, this is a safe space, because that's what it is. And to ask all those questions that sometimes we're just afraid to ask, especially when we're talking about jobs and looking for roles and getting into jobs and things like that. So really quickly, I'm going to tell you a short bio. So Jantina is an education, leadership, policy, and doctoral candidate. So she is currently getting her PhD. She has 20 years of HR leadership experience in corporate America. She's an HBCU grad too, just like me. I went to Tennessee State. She went to Clark. And also went to Michigan State. And so she has her bachelor's and master's, and like I said, is working on her PhD. She is married, she has kids, so she is an every woman. She's doing all the things, but obviously has a very, very pivotal role at Carrier, where she is currently Associate Director of HR. So Jantina, thank you so much for joining us. So excited to have you.
Yes, it is my pleasure. It is truly my pleasure. I am very glad to be here. And as you pointed out, I definitely have a passion to promote, uplift, empower, and make positive spaces for women. And women of color, more specifically. So I'm happy to see you all, or at least to see your pictures. I hope I can meet more of you and we can actually dialogue this evening, but I want to answer your questions. I want this to be interactive, and to help you in any way that I can. So I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. So my first question, and it's kind of the softball of all questions, is because I'll be honest, before we first met, I had to double check to understand if I knew what Carrier did. So who is Carrier? What is the organization? What does the company do?
Right.
And then tell me about your kind of path into the role that you're in right now.
Sure. So Carrier is not necessarily a sexy company, right? It's not like a Microsoft, a Google, a Tesla, one of those household names that you're familiar with. But I bet if you look either outside your home or in maybe like a small shopping retail space, or even at a hotel, you'll find our equipment. So if you look outside and look at the HVAC equipment that's connected to your home or your condo building or apartment building, if you see Bryant, Payne, or Carrier, that's Carrier. If you go to a hotel and you see automated logic with the key card used to open your hotel door, that's Carrier. If you look up in the ceiling and you see a fire detector that says Kidde, Kidde, or go to Home Depot and see that same brand, that's Carrier. So we are actually a household brand, literally. Like you'll find us within your home or even in spaces where you may reside for a short period of time. But ultimately, Carrier, the three divisions include HVAC, transportation, refrigeration, transportation. So when you think about the COVID vaccine, or at one point we talked about McDonald's shakes, we're the organization that's able to help companies transport that vaccine from place to place to make sure that it remains good and viable.
Wow.
And then when you think about security and safety from the perspective of, like, again, locks, or fire detection, that's also a part of Curios. So those are the three divisions. We are global. So the majority of our footprint is here in the US, as well as our employees. We have a little under 60,000 employees. And sales are about, let me double check, but I believe it's about 200 million per year, at least last year.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
So it's not letting up.
Let me
I was
correct
gonna say,
myself. Net sales are 20.6 billion. I'm
billion.
way
I was gonna say, I'm like, it feels like it should be in the billions.
Yes, 20.6 billion. So I'm way off. Let me get it right.
Look, the 20 million might just be the US. Who knows? That's awesome. So how did you end up at Carrier, and how long have you been there now?
So I've been with Carrier a little over 8 years. My transition, it was motivated for personal reasons. So I used to work for Cummins in Columbus, Indiana. I applied to a PhD program, which I'm wrapping up, and wasn't quite sure if I would be accepted or not. But I knew if I would be accepted, I would need a job or a position that's closer to Indianapolis, so I could manage going to class, being mommy, wife, and my job, my role. And so I actually received an opportunity in Collierville, Tennessee, which is close to Memphis, Tennessee, like a suburb. Think of Carmel and Indianapolis. And turned it down because the day after I got that offer, I received acceptance into the PhD program. And so I just explained to them, hey, I really like the company. I know you had some opportunities in Indianapolis. It turns out that I need to stay here. Do you have any opportunities here in Indianapolis that you would consider me for? A few weeks later, they called me, had a whirlwind of interviews, and I joined the company. So
Wow.
I've been there ever since.
Was it a similar role? Was it HR2, the role that was in Tennessee?
It was similar, but it
Okay.
was in a plant. So from
Oh,
an
yeah.
HR perspective, I mean, it's similar that it's HR, but the pace, if any of you have worked in operations or manufacturing, the pace is much different than working at a headquarters location, which is basically what I do today.
Yeah, yeah. So the one question that you mentioned, or actually not question, but something that you brought up, is that Carrier is not seen as like a cool company, right?
Right.
And that's one thing that I think we have to like really dissect, right? Like there's the startup companies that we all know and love that we're familiar with, right? Like you mentioned Google, you mentioned Tesla, Facebook, people like that. Like we know those names, those are household names. But what we don't realize is that all of these other companies that are large corporations also have those same functions within their companies because they also have to have these sort of tech and tech related sort of things happening within the company in order to keep up, right? I mean, you mentioned refrigeration, you mentioned being able to transport things, like their systems and their processes that have to happen. And a lot of those need roles like project management and IT and automation and things like that too. So I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, kind of what is the concentration of those kind of roles within Carrier, especially now that you're a part of the corporate headquarters section of like HR? Because obviously in the plant, I mean, you're hiring the same sorts of folks. But in this role, I'm sure you're looking at so many different kinds of roles. Like how big is that portion of you know your roles currently?
Sure. So just to, I guess, give you a little background on what I do within Carrier. So HR, we talked about that, but specifically I support a few different, we call them client groups or businesses or functions. So I support engineering, which when you think about project management, process management, project management, all of that falls within, or the majority of it falls within engineering. We also have a project PMO, project management office. In addition to that, I support quality. So when you think of quality engineers, think about those who are designing, trying to prevent error or issues in the design process. So making sure that we're creating a product that's going to withstand whatever we need it to withstand, whether it be temperatures, noise, a length of time, etc. But that would be the quality organization. And then they're also providing service to individuals who use our products. So whether it be HVAC equipment for like large universities or small strip malls or even homes, there are quality technicians and engineers that go out into the field and make sure that the products are operating properly or help individuals when the products are not. Also, I support the light commercial business. So a particular business or organization within HVAC that's selling a certain type of HVAC equipment. So think of Chipotle or 7-Eleven. They need HVAC equipment for their stores or their locations. So the light commercial business is responsible for providing, like, outfitting their locations. And then the replacement components business, which I guess if you think about, if you have a car, right, and something breaks down, you need a particular part in order to repair it. So the replacement components business is like that. They sell the particular parts to make sure that the equipment continues to run once it's out in the field. And so I support that business as well. But to answer your question specifically, and at one point I supported digital, those particular areas are booming. Like when you think about digital, we can't keep up. One, because again, we don't necessarily have the sexy name. So individuals aren't looking to us thinking, well, yeah, of course they have opportunities for my skill set, or of course they have opportunities for things that I'm interested in that relates to digital. But we do. So we're working hard to kind of change that story, that narrative, and make sure that people understand this is how digital, that skill set, fits within our corporation. And this is how we see that skill set being critical for our future, because we do. I mean, when you think about really anything, I mean, your refrigerator, just anything in your home anymore, you can pick up your phone and you can program it and tell it, I'm on my way home. I need you to do whatever by the time I arrive. We're no different. We want that same convenience for our customers. And so that's a part of what digital and engineering, that's what they're doing. I mean, it's called connected homes, but essentially they're helping customers operate their equipment more efficiently. So we're also, trying to reduce the carbon footprint and work on all the sustainability goals. But we also have to have the technology and the innovation to make sure that our customers can pick up their phones and say, I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to Vegas for the weekend. Cut the air off. I'm not trying to pay the bill while I'm gone. I'm not trying to run up that extra energy. Just cut it off. And then I should arrive Sunday by 5, have the house set at 70 degrees. So,
So, so a lot of smart home, smart mobility functions, obviously. There's internal like needs of tech like IT and things, but also just like product development, innovation of products and needing people on the team that can help make those things a reality are needed. And that's part of your digital transformation and innovation as well.
right, right. So smart, definitely. When you think of
Hmm.
product development, this particular industry is heavily regulated. So right now we're going through a major overhaul of really all of our products to make sure the HVAC products to make sure that we remain compliant with the
Mm.
government regulations. And so again, when you think about program project management, I have a role open right now. If anybody's ready, I will recruit you right now.
Uh-oh, there's already a role. Don't worry, we will share all of the open roles, Jantina. Don't you worry, because we have plenty. I think we have a few project management folks in this cohort, so or in this
Okay.
group today. So we definitely have a few. One other thing I'm curious about too is there's obviously so one thing. Well, let me actually rewind. So one thing I tell people a lot, and this is kind of going back to kind of what we see as traditional tech companies, is like people think if it's a traditional tech company that you just have to know how to code and that's it, right? Not realizing that traditional tech companies also have roles like HR and marketing and the basic stuff that you just need to run a business. Obviously, you have those kind of functions too, but I'd be curious to know from your perspective, especially as a larger corporate entity, the impact that data has had on the business. And are there roles and opportunities for people that are learning data analytics or data visualizations and things like that? And how are those things incorporated within the company as well?
Yeah, I would also say that it's had a huge impact. I mean, I don't think there's a function that has not been affected by the need for more data as well as the need to be able to access different data. So even within HR, I actually just spoke with her today. We have a data analytics team. There was one person in particular that worked here in Indianapolis who now works remotely, but she performs data analytics within HR. The same is true for quality. The same is true for product marketing. And the same is true for even replacement components. That particular business within HVAC, I'm going to tend to lean towards HVAC because that's
Hmm.
the business unit that I work within.
Right.
But I know for sure automated logics, they're also in the same position as well as refrigeration and transportation. But they're using that data to really influence what type of products we're offering. They're using that data to better understand the reliability of our products in the field, the type of warranties that we're providing, the type of service agreements. Like we have recently launched a new business which essentially allows consumers to sign up for a service agreement to make owning their HVAC equipment just without worry, right? So if anything goes wrong, they just pick up the phone and say, hey, it broke down, come fix it. And they've
Hmm.
already paid whatever fee. We send out who we need to, order whatever parts, and that's it. The fee that they paid for that service is the only fee essentially that they'll have in order to maintain their equipment. So data is important from that aspect as well. And if I can go back to the innovation piece, I'll be remiss if I don't mention this. But when we think about COVID, I know it wasn't the best of times, but within Carrier, we were able to create equipment to help purify or clean the air. And so when you think about innovation, the engineering organization was responsible for modifying something that we already had to meet that need and help individuals, school corporations, everyone everywhere during that period in time. And then we were able to then take that a bit further, and now we sell indoor air quality products, so that as we continue with creating, safe spaces, the sustainability and whatnot, we have something to share with the market as well, in which to make your home a bit safer and more comfortable for, all who are in it. So that's just another example of innovation.
Yeah, I love that because I think there's this assumption that, these large companies aren't consistently innovating, creating new products and creating new solutions to new problems that come about. And so I love when I get to hear that because there's an assumption like, oh, the startups are doing everything. It's like, no, these large organizations are also innovating inside their own walls as well, which I think is a huge need. So I'm going to shift a little bit because we've talked a lot about like kind of the business. I'd love to hear more about some of these young ladies I imagine might be looking for jobs. I'm big on corporate culture. Like, what does it feel like to work in a building? And especially when, you are a person of color or a woman of color. We all know what those opportunities or what those circumstances can be like sometimes. So I'd love to hear more about just Carrier's corporate culture, how you guys help develop talent, how you guys support new and early talent. Would love to just hear more from your perspective on that too.
Definitely. So we're not perfect. I'll start there.
Of course,
Because,
we're all trying.
yeah, I don't want to paint a picture or set an expectation that, we're the best of the best of the best and we have no issues. We all have issues. Honestly, don't let any organization paint that picture. I think it's important for you to understand what you need from a company, from a culture where you will feel most comfortable. And as you're interviewing and meeting different people from these different companies and cultures, interview them. Like it's not just a one-way conversation, them assessing you to see if you're a fit for their culture. You also need to make sure that their culture is somewhere that you want to be. Now, having said that, within Carrier, we do have multiple programs. Some are more formal, where, oh,
Oh, that was me.
okay.
I agree.
Some are more formal, where your manager has to nominate you or suggest that you be a part of the program. And then others are less formal, where you can just go out online and say, hey, I want to participate. For example, if you want a mentor, that's open to anyone and everyone within Carrier. So there's actually a page where you can read about mentorship within Carrier. You can essentially raise your virtual hand and say, I'd like a mentor and I want to be paired with somebody who's knowledgeable or has experience in this area. And then you'll be matched. We also have the more formal programs they're called Elevate, and they're also Talent Possible programs, but essentially they're designed to help employees at certain points in their career. So early career, mid-career, and when you're close to the executive level. The Elevate programs are really there to help individuals in particular demographics. So we have the Elevate Black employees, and we also have Elevate Women. And so they're somewhat similar because they're both meant to uplift, empower, and help individuals within those demographics gain more exposure to executives across the organization, but to also improve upon or develop particular skill sets. But they're different because of the demographic. So with Elevate Blacks, it's heavily influenced by our Carrier Black Alliance or our ERG for Black employees, as well as the Women's Elevate program. It's heavily influenced by the Women's ERG. So in understanding what their experiences are like in corporate America and how we can better support them. That's what I mean by influence. In addition to that, we have the ERGs. So we have the Black employees ERGs, women, Hispanic and Latinx, let me think, Asian ERG. We also have a veterans ERG. So we have a number of ERGs where employees can get involved and begin to build their network across the organization. And then there are just other, I would call them volunteer opportunities. So we have community outreach efforts. Here in Indianapolis, we support the Habitat for Humanity. We support, there's a corporate challenge where a bunch of corporations in Indianapolis get together and kind of What's the name of that game where they, I'm not gonna think, but they it's like obstacle courses.
Oh,
Um,
is it like warrior, like ninja warrior kind of
yeah,
thing?
that's
Yeah.
it. Ninja Warrior. So essentially, you have a chance to sign up, and now that's not a traditional development program, but it's a great way to network and to start building relationships. And now I'll share something about myself. I don't particularly care for the term and the idea of networking
Mhm.
because it feels, at least the way it was presented to me when I was coming up, it felt very fake. And I'm not, I just don't gravitate towards that. So I look for opportunities to build relationships, to find people who have similar interests or who we can, work together to achieve something or to help the organization and build a relationship with them. So these kind of extracurricular activities, if you like to volunteer in a particular area, it gives you the opportunity to start building relationships. And sometimes those relationships are with people from outside of your function. They could be executives, but again, it's a way to kind of create a brand for yourself and make sure that people know who you are and can advocate or at least speak to who you are even when you're not in the room and you're familiar. And I think that goes a long way no matter what function you're in, what organization you're in.
Yeah, I agree. I'm an introvert. I don't think anybody would believe that. And so networking has always been really tricky for me because it's like I can turn it on, and then when I'm ready to turn it off, I turn it off. But I find that I am best suited in networking situations when I'm able to build alongside with or like build a real relationship with someone as you're kind of going through that process. Because I'll, sign off in loans. So actually love the idea of like some of the more active things because it feels less pressure, right? Like I think when I think about ERG, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, it feels like so much pressure, But when I think about things where we're just like building things together or like doing an obstacle course together, like I'm more likely to engage a little bit differently because of those opportunities. So I love the balance of the two, right? Like you said, we're all still working on it, but I like the fact that there's different opportunities for people to engage, which I think is so important. So I'm going to ask one of the $1 million questions, and I don't know if it's like $1 million question or maybe it's just like a $50,000 question or $75,000 question. But I guess question one would be, does Carrier have open roles right now? And if someone is interested in joining a team, maybe it's in one of these functions that you've talked about today, what would you suggest that they do? Should they just apply? Do you recommend kind of building networks or like getting connected to the organization a little bit before? Like, I'd love to hear your perspective on
Yep. So we definitely have open roles. Um,
that. Most
if
of them
you're,
do.
yes, I mean, if you're interested in opportunities in Indianapolis, please let me know. Especially if it relates to any of the functions that I mentioned that I support. I am, use me seriously. Be nice, but use me. As far as how you should go about expressing your interest, I mean, definitely apply, but don't stop there. If there's an opportunity to reach out to someone that you know within Carrier, and actually start here because we have an employee referral program. If you know someone within Carrier, let them know that you're interested in applying for an opportunity and tell them to, or don't tell them, ask them to refer you to the company because that way you get an in. You're someone that was referred by a current employee that's looked upon favorably. They potentially get a benefit. If you're hired, they'll get some type of incentive for you joining the company. So it's a win-win for everybody. So unfortunately, I can't do that for you because I'm in HR. I can't participate, but I can connect you with others who may be able to help you. Or again, if in your networks you know someone who works for Carrier, just remind them, hey, you guys have an employee referral program, right? Yeah, well, I'm thinking about applying for this position. Is it possible for you to refer me to Carrier? That way I have your referral and you can be eligible for the incentive. Make it good for both of you. But if you don't know anybody, apply and then use LinkedIn. I mean, use LinkedIn. use, there are opportunities where we're out in the community. We're meeting here this evening. If there are other events where you see carrier folks at, just use your elevator speech, introduce yourself, and ask if it's possible for you to connect, later. Maybe you buy them a cup of coffee or whatever the case is. Or if there's something that, like, for instance, we attended the Dress for Success event here recently. So there was a whole carrier table full of carrier women that were accessible, right? So maybe if you attended that event, then you talk about Dress for Success. You ask how carriers involved outside of this event. And then maybe you follow up with an email on LinkedIn and say, it was really nice speaking with you at the Dress for Success event. Just wondering if you would be interested in having, coffee, or here's an article that I found around whatever you talked about, and share it with them. Start building that relationship, and then, they'll eventually or ideally will support you in your application process.
As I was looking at kind of roles that were open in carrier, because I did look, because I was like, let's just make sure that there's things here that people in these groups can apply for. And like some of the ones that I saw, like I was just surprised by. And not surprised as in like, I can't believe carrier has this role, but just like the kind of role it was just something I wouldn't expect. So product marketing analyst, right? Like these is for my digital marketing people. I've seen I've seen a ton of project management roles, like a ton. Buyer analyst. I've seen engineering roles. Like you literally have almost every type of role I've ever seen in some of these places. So I'll say this. If anyone in here is going to be looking soon, and I have a follow-up to that too, Jantina, but if anyone is looking, I would say just search on Indianapolis alone, and this is if you're in Indy, and see what they have. But my follow-up to that too is, are you guys hiring remote talent as well? Is there flexibility there, or is most of the roles like in office?
So it's both, right?
Okay.
I would say more are in office, and within office, there is some flexibility. We have a program which essentially allows employees to work 25% of the time, however they choose to. So if you want to work from home, and it's 25% of your time, right? So if 1 week a month you want to work from home and the other 3 weeks you're in the office, that's fine. Just however you want to divide that 25% is up to you. And of course, get your managers buy-in and support. There are some positions that are remote. We don't have as many as some other organizations, but for instance, within the groups that I support, our software and systems engineers, they're working remotely. Our model-based development engineers are working remotely. Like their work doesn't require them to be in the office, so they have more flexibility. Our digital team, from my understanding, I no longer support digital, but they used to sit on the 7th floor. The 7th floor is now empty. They're working remote.
Digital said, I'm out of here. Digital said, we're going to be working at home.
Exactly. So just depending on the role, there is that flexibility and opportunity. But I would say, like my role, it's more in the office. And you can also make arrangements with your manager. We also have flexible work arrangement opportunities where if you tell your manager, for this period of time, maybe it's the summertime where if you have children or if you travel or whatever the case may be, you just need a little more flexibility during the summer. So you say during the summer, I'd like to come in 2 days a week and the rest of the time I want to work remotely. Or these next 3 weeks, I need to work remotely because of whatever. So that flexibility is there too.
Awesome. That's always good to hear. I think everyone's looking for some flexibility. So it's glad to hear that you guys have that. I have one last question before I open it up to anyone that maybe want to ask questions. But I was curious, and this is from your seat that you sit in HR. What are some do's and don'ts that you see on, especially for either digital or technical kind of roles? What are the things that you like to see on a resume or on a CV or on the LinkedIn that is really important to you as you're kind of looking as maybe the first or second round of people that are looking at resumes?
So let me share this. I'll answer your question, but let me share kind of some context around how staffing works or talent acquisition works within Carrier.
Hmm.
And you'll probably see other organizations. Well, actually, you wouldn't know it. We have an RPO, so we essentially outsource recruiting. So
Really?
I'm not the first person who sees a resume. The people that we've hired to recruit for us, they're the first person who sees a resume. So
It's good to
usually,
know.
yeah. So it's kind of I have mixed feelings, but we that's not why we're
Yeah.
on. The phone.
We can talk about that. I mean, I've heard that people do that a lot, but yeah, I can understand why it might be mixed. Maybe
Yeah.
that's another topic for another day.
Yes. Yes. So what I will say, as far as your resume goes, pay attention to the job description. And I know it's cliche because I don't know, I didn't think that it was really necessary, but it is. Look at the job description and adjust or modify your resume or your cover letter, whatever you're submitting, to align with that job description. Because essentially, those recruiters, that's what they're doing. They're looking
Yeah.
for the key terms and experience that hiring manager has told them is important for this role. Usually, it's in the job description. Sometimes they'll add a little something to it, but if you can align yourself with that job description, then you have a much better chance of being picked up by that recruiter, whether they're internal or external, than if you just submit the same resume to every opportunity that you see.
That's a great note. One, I think you should do that no matter the job. So that I agree with. But I think it's important to kind of know the distinction. And to your point, Jantina, you wouldn't know, right? As you
Yeah.
apply, you don't realize that there's someone else not that doesn't necessarily work there that's looking at the resume, but they're literally only looking for those keywords, right? They just want to see the 5 years this, the 2 years this, the whatever it may be that's necessary. So making sure you adapt it to that is important. But I would say for the group, that is just a great note to know because it lets you know that sometimes it's not being read maybe full out, or maybe they're not getting the full breadth of your experience, or even how the context of your various different kinds of experience may add up to you being able to do a particular role, especially as you're coming in with a certificate, and especially if you're a career changer. So we're going to actually talk about that in about 2 weeks, which is going to be fun.
Okay.
But yeah, because because you also have your startups, like, and I'll say like for specific startups that are like don't technically have like an internal HR person, but usually it's probably just someone on a team. It's the same thing, right? Like they're not looking, they're just looking for like, can this person do what I need them to do, right? And then you can, once you get in there, there's an opportunity to kind of do and learn more. But the combination of like before you apply, what that looks like, submitting the resume and understanding like it might just be people looking for terms. Is it? It's something you have to be ready for and expect, and be ready to kind of share that narrative of whatever background or transitions and things like that that you have as well. So that might be a little tricky, but good note. That's good to know. I wrote that down for my future notes to make sure I always note that because larger organizations do that.
They do. They do. And there's some that still have recruiting in-house.
Mm-hmm.
But even regardless of whether it's in-house or they're using a vendor, some use systems like technology. I mean,
The
some will,
ATS systems do
yeah,
it too.
and
Yep.
look for keywords and never take a good review of the entire resume. What I'll
Mm-hmm.
also add though, look at your LinkedIn profile. And I'm sure you've talked about this, but it's important to really, because you're not going to know of all opportunities that are out there, right? I mean, that's a full-time job trying to find a new opportunity or apply for different positions. So make sure, like some people say, make sure your money's working for you. Don't always chase the money. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is working for you. Don't always chase the opportunities. So when you're working on your LinkedIn profile, make sure as you're talking about your experiences, really talk about the things that you've accomplished. If you can quantify those things in any way, do that, as well as include those key terms within your LinkedIn profile. So we call them passive candidates. As candidates, or maybe we're not getting as many applications as we want or would like, recruiters will go out on LinkedIn and in other places and start to comb through profiles to say, they seem to have some of what is needed for this job. I wonder if they're interested. And the only way that they're able to even make that decision or that determination is based on your profile. That's what they're looking at. So make sure your profile is working for you as well.
Yeah. We're also doing a session on LinkedIn profiles, so that's coming
Okay.
soon as well. It's gonna be fun. You guys, whatever you need, we got it. But you know what's so interesting, and this is more of like just a story. So before I transitioned into doing the fund and Be Nimble full time, I was a director of people, culture, and brand for a startup. And my background was not in HR, but I always saw recruiting as sales, and my background is in sales and marketing. And so that was something that I leaned in heavy on. But one thing that I always did, no matter where I got the resume, is I always looked at a person's LinkedIn. And a lot of my reasoning for moving someone to the next phase would depend on whether or not the resume and the LinkedIn matched, or if it felt like they were active enough or kept their LinkedIn profile updated. Like, I don't even know if people realize how important LinkedIn is sometimes than like a traditional resume in a lot of ways too. And so making sure those two things align. But to your point, making sure the LinkedIn also tells a great story. And what we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks is really about building your brand on LinkedIn too. Those things matter. And those things also help you get opportunities and seek out opportunities. So I 100% agree. So I think we're down to like the last like 13, 12 minutes, and we can probably go over a little bit, but I definitely don't want to keep you too long. I'd love to open it up to the room on questions, or if anybody has any questions for Jantina, or if you are shy and just want to put them in the chat, I'm fine with that too. But would love to hear your voices if we can. Candace has a question. Hey, Candace.
Hey, thank you so much for the information and the floor. I just had a couple questions, but I will limit it to one for the sake of time. But one thing I wanted to know is, you know how when you apply for applications and there's a questionnaire about your race, gender, and things of that nature. I've always been curious if that either helps your chances or reduces your chances. Of course, it's, you're not supposed to be biased in things, but I just am never sure. So I always put would rather not disclose, but I'm always curious. And especially with your expertise, just kind of wondered, is that something that we should be doing on applications, or does it matter? Or what are your thoughts?
So technically, that information should be segregated from your application. Technically, that information is to help organizations understand, I guess, just how well they're doing with diversity in their hiring efforts. But it shouldn't, like, you're submitting your application and then you're answering those questions. They shouldn't continue through the process together. Like, that data should go into a particular bucket while your resume and application move on. So I think it's safe to include. I'll be honest, there are other ways that recruiters can identify or attempt to identify your ethnicity or your race or your gender through information online. So while they shouldn't, it happens.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question in the chat asking about salary, and I'm assuming you mean if people ask what your salary requirements are, should you list them? Is that what you're asking, Kiana?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So what are your thoughts on putting your salary, if they ask like your salary requirements, what are your thoughts on actually listing your salary? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Just don't lowball yourself. Do your I'm serious. So in some states have adopted the position where employers can no longer ask employees what they earned previously or what they're currently earning, because it hasn't helped with the wage gap. If anything, it's supported it. It's helped to maintain it. And so instead, they'll ask you what your expectations are. So when you're sharing your expectations, do your research. Like, make sure you understand what the minimum is that you'll accept for an opportunity, but also what the market is willing to pay for a particular position or function or role. I think it's okay to offer it. I always offer in a range, right? So I try not to price myself out of an opportunity, but I also don't want to leave anything on the table. I want to be paid for what I'm worth. So it's important to do that research. And one way that I do research, I reach out to friends. They happen to be friends in HR. But now you have a friend in HR. I'll do what I can to help you. But essentially, I find out what the market is like in that particular area or for those types of roles, and I make my decision based on that. I mean, there have been a couple of times where my friends have said it's this, and I'm like, oh no, I'm worth more than that. So we're gonna have to go higher, or this just isn't the right opportunity for me. So I think it's fine. Just and don't limit yourself. So include some type of range. And maybe you could also let them know that you're open to maybe a combination, right? Because there's your base salary and then there's total compensation. Like some positions, they're offering your annual base salary plus a bonus. So that's another way to kind of present what you're looking for from them. You may say, I'm interested in, I don't know, 150. I'll take 150 base. I'll take 135 with a 10% bonus eligibility. And that way you give them some flexibility.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with range. I'm curious, what is your thoughts on like platforms like Glassdoor, salary.com? Like do you feel like those work or are given good market rates, or do you recommend kind of talking to people more? If
don't rely on that solely, because that's all voluntary information. And so like I've had candidates say, well, I saw on Glassdoor such and such this role should be this, and it's like, okay, but if only 5 people said that this is what they earned and they exaggerated or inflated what they earned, then that's not a credible source. So you can use it, but also include something else. I mean, look at the cost of living, look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There are many other more noteworthy, incredible sources that you can use in order to get that information.
I was also thinking about too, sometimes size of company, because I think a lot of times like larger corporate organizations versus like a smaller company, like those scales are different, and so if you're coming, like I have a friend that literally just happened to left San Francisco for an engineering role, was going to be in Chicago, and Chicago's cost of living is high, but it's not San Francisco high, right? So you're not going to make 300K in Chicago, unfortunately. Like you're just not. And that was hard for them to understand, right? So I think you also have to value that too. There's another one in the chat.
Before we leave the compensation piece, one other quick here. Now, certain states, I know Colorado is one, I think New York is another, but if organizations or companies are posting positions and looking for talent in those locations, they're required by law now to include the salary range. So that's another, I mean, it might be tricky to try to find, those exact postings with that information, but if you come across it, write it down, jot it down, because that's another good way to find the compensation information.
Yep, I agree. That's a good note. I'm glad we're recording this because I didn't write that down, but I will. Akira asked, are you okay with sharing your LinkedIn? And I think I put it in the calendar invite, but I think are you okay with sharing your LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Is it okay if I drop it in the chat or you drop it in the chat? Okay.
Sure. It's just my name. I don't think there are too many with my name, so, and definitely not with locks and a nose ring or two. So I'm out there. Just look for me. We can connect.
I'm gonna drop it in the chat too, just for everyone. And I think it's in the calendar invite if you need to find it. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or Jantina, do you have any questions for our girls? Like it's all women in here today. Like I didn't expect this. I really didn't. I actually love it. I was like, I thought for sure I'd get 1 or 2 guys, but I think it's all girls. So okay. I love that.
Well, just what in this, I know we only have a few more minutes, but I would love to understand your experiences and just things that maybe folks like myself in HR or corporations in general, what they should be aware of as far as what you're looking for, or maybe some of the experiences that you're having that we need to improve upon if we're serious about recruiting talent like you. Like what would
I
you
love
want
that.
to know?
I might add that to every session afterwards.
Okay.
I want you guys to tell the person, like, what do you want to see? What do you need more of? Does anybody have anything? Please tell me y'all got something.
I
I have
guess
a question. Oh,
Uh-oh. Go ahead, Whitney.
wait.
You're good.
okay. So one thing that has been challenging for me, I used to work in higher ed, and then I changed, transition to tech. And so higher ed, salaries aren't great. The culture is a little different. So applying to corporate careers it's been a shift. So even understanding that you don't have to have all of the bullet points on the job description, like that's been something I had to adjust to, even though I've been in tech for a little bit now, actually. But even so I did web development for a while, and now I'm transitioning into getting more into the digital marketing. I'm trying to figure out like how I should market myself better. So just I guess kind of understanding like how to approach like job descriptions and understanding like should you make sure you have like 50% of what's on there, 60, 80, like what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to lean on the advice that I see on social media all of the time. Um, as women, we tend to limit ourselves because we are trying to check, each of those bullet points or each of those boxes that they have on the job description. There is no candidate that has all of that. So don't limit yourself. I mean, there is no perfect candidate, period. You can ask any hiring manager, you can ask any HR person. If they find, it's like finding the purple haired unicorn. It's ideal, but there's usually a set of experiences or skills that's within that job description that they're really interested in. Now, how you'll go about figuring that out, it's not easy. Maybe you talk to a recruiter. Sometimes the recruiters are listed on the role. Like if you have questions, contact this person. But I say go for it. I mean, just put your best foot forward, highlight the experiences that you feel are your strengths and that seem to really pop from the job description. Look at the job description and look for themes. I mean, if you can see that, in general, they want someone that's, you said you're in web analytics or web development.
Web development and then digital marketing.
So if you look at a particular role and, in general, it aligns with your experience, but they say they want someone who's, I don't know, able to handle a large volume of development work. Well, if you've done that in some capacity, then put that at the top of your resume. So I just don't limit yourself. Do not, it is perfectly fine that you do not have all those experiences that they're listing out. No one does. Go for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also, well, you didn't ask. We can talk about that another time because there's other people in here that have stuff. Candace, these aren't questions. I think these are things that would be good for you to know. So
okay.
I asked about remote and conversations about DEI efforts. So I guess being open and having those conversations with diverse candidates, I assume, Candace, is that what you mean? Hopefully that's what you mean. I don't
Yeah,
know.
just to have a better understanding of the importance and your company's values and the reason why you're doing the DEI efforts, because a lot of them stem from, maybe not the best circumstances, but being transparent up front so you can understand what that corporate culture is moving towards is helpful.
Okay. So
That's a
like in
great
the
note.
material or as you're having conversations with different interviewers during the process or?
I think it's important to address it early on in conversation. So even in the first interview, you could give a brief overview. It doesn't have to be extremely lengthy, but just in the same way that the candidates are introducing themselves to introduce, to diverse candidate, well, to all candidates, why this is important to you, and also making that known upfront for new candidates who aren't really emphasizing or who don't prioritize DEI, then they can make a decision too. So moving forward with your company's culture's evolution to make sure that you're having people that align with that.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. Going back to my experience once again, when I was when I was an HR person for like a year and a half, one of the things, well, so for context, it was also a Black-led company. So I think naturally we had like a diversity lens, a diversity focus because we were a diverse company, but it was something that we did include, I think, like in our descriptions. I think we included as part of like our blurb. So people, whether they were, I mean, we hired, people of all races, but they knew that that was something that was important to us because we are a diverse leadership team, that we are obviously going to embrace diversity. But I can see that also being very important, even, if it's not a diverse, I can see that being very important overall. So that's a great note. There's another note in here too. I know we're like a minute over, so I'll go quick. Diverse interview panels, which I think is so important. Like when you're doing the panel interview, having like different people there. I have a feeling that you know all about that too. And then transparency about transitions occurring with the company and culture. That's tricky. That's tricky, but that's a real one too. I'm gonna take that. Let me copy and paste that one too into my notes because we're gonna talk about that because that's gonna be a separate conversation. Because I think it's okay to be in transition or to be in flux or to be trying to figure it out, like
Yeah.
I think it's okay, but you got to admit it. You have to say like, we are really doing our best. We're trying, but don't like sell the world. And then you get there and it's like, yeah, this is not what I expected, or wasn't in the place that I thought it was,
Yeah, kind of like Candace's point. I mean, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I would say that carriers in that boat. I mean, we're not motivated by anything. Like we don't have any findings. The EEOC hasn't come out and said, "Oh my God, you're terrible. You must do these things." It's nothing like, it's not motivated by anything negative. But we are in the midst of improving we call it inclusion and diversity, but our inclusion and diversity efforts. We're starting with inclusion because we want employees to feel as if they belong, and Carrier is a safe space. And regardless of, who you are, how you show up, what you believe in personally, like religious, etc., there's an opportunity for you within Carrier. Now, we do have particular values, which I don't think those values would negate any of the inclusion and diversity efforts. If anything, they support and uphold them. But yeah, we have different initiatives. Like we have a partnership with the AUC in Atlanta. We have multiple scholarships for Spelman students. We have a relationship with North Carolina A&T. Now, the focus to date has been more so with early career talent. But since 2020, when everybody kind of woke up, or at least started to pay more attention, we're making other efforts as well internally, like with the ERGs, with training. We now have a director of diversity and inclusion that reports to the chief HR officer and sits at the table with all of the other executives. So yeah, we're not perfect, but to your point, Candace, talk about it. Like, don't hold back. And to your point, Kelly, be honest. And I'm not sure who else made that comment, but be honest. Don't sell the world and then have the person come up and is womp womp. This is not what you described.
So I apologize. I have one kind of small last question. So if you guys can hang on for me for like 3 more seconds. Jantina, I'm curious from your perspective, and this is something that I'm asking of organizations. How open do you think you are, or Carrier's organization are, to hiring people that are coming in with more non-traditional backgrounds? Specifically, most of the people that we're working with are either transitioning into tech or maybe have a little bit of a background and are getting a certification. Are you guys looking at those kind of candidates too? Because we have found that there's some places that aren't, or aren't interested or think they need more. And one of the things that I've uncovered in just looking at our data is that while we do have a lot of people that are either, high school diploma, trying to get a certification, maybe a lot of people have bachelor's degrees, but are still underpaid based on where they are, and also are trying to get this to, get into a better role. So have a lot of those soft skills, have a lot of work experience, and are just building up the actual skills to do a new role. Is that something that's like Carrier's open to? Are you guys looking at talent that kind of comes from that place and sector?
So I'll answer it this way. I would say that we're not as advanced or progressive as some other companies. Like if you think about, I think it's Google or Microsoft, one of the organizations, I mean, there have been news reports about them no longer requiring degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not crossed that bridge. But I'll say we haven't crossed that bridge generally. There are cases, right? So for instance, there have been a couple of positions that I've filled recently with my hiring managers where the candidates didn't have degrees, but they were already within the organization. So they were an employee and they had experience and they could speak to that experience, or they were a temporary. So that's, I mean, if it's something that you can do, taking a temporary role to get your foot in the door is another opportunity to get the experience that you want to kind of build your, your resume, your credentials and whatnot. And if it's a company that you're really interested in, it's a good way to build those relationships and show them who you are and what you're capable of. But the long story short is, because those individuals were inside, or we had some knowledge of them, it wasn't necessary for them to have a degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say that we do more of it at the onset,
mm-hmm.
but we're just not there yet. So
good to know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we ask. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jantina. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being willing to do this with us. Thank you to everyone that joined. Hopefully you'll continue to join us for these, since we have these coming up pretty regularly. And you'll probably get a survey just to get your feedback so that we can make sure that we're doing things and scheduling things and people and experiences that are helpful to you guys. So thank you, Jantina. I appreciate you. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a great evening. And this will be recorded, so we'll share it with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Soon. Good to see you all.
Please connect on LinkedIn.
Bye.